Welcome to The Dish on Divorce. I'm Leanne Townsend.
And I'm Jennifer Barkin.
And we are here as your girlfriends, so grab a coffee, grab a glass of wine, get comfortable, and let's dish.
So Leanne, I don't know if you've been watching any TV this week, but there was a big interview.
Definitely.
Okay.
I don't think any of us could miss that. If you didn't watch it, you at least heard a lot about it.
With Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. So the monarchy is not very happy, and she spilled a lot. She
She does spill a lot.
So the reason I'm thinking of this and bringing it up today is my question for you. Do you think they left the UK because it wasn't very good on their marriage?
Well, I think they definitely left the UK because it wasn't very good on their marriage. I think that there were maybe some other reasons as well. I have my opinions, which maybe I'll say my opinions are a little controversial, and they're not what most North Americans' opinions are, on this situation.
I'm curious.
But I think, they were obviously very unhappy. I think the press. I think there's lots of evidence that the press was unfair to Meghan in contrast to how they've been to Kate. And whatnot. So I think, certainly, they looked miserable. Meghan in particular looked miserable. And so I definitely think that was a driving force to them leaving the UK. What about you?
I think for sure. I don't think Meghan was treated very nicely. Saying that, obviously I haven't sat down and chatted with either one of them.
No, that's her next show. We hope.
Either one of them, but I'm not so sure how innocent she is in all of this.
No, and that's where I would agree. I find that the prevalent sort of North American view is very empathetic towards her and towards Harry, and I'm not quite as empathetic. I've watched the interview, so I saw it firsthand, and when she was describing some of her experiences and she was talking about, being so depressed and, then having to put herself together and go out to an event and put on a smile. And what I was kind of thinking is, that's often just a day in my life, to be honest, even today, I've had a very hectic week. I know you have as well. I didn't necessarily feel like coming, down, being on camera, getting fixed up, and having the energy for a show, but I do it because that's what I have to do. And there's many times in my job and in my life where I would rather just stay in bed and pull the covers over my head, but I have to get up and I have to smile and I have to do things, and I don't have like a glam squad. I don't have drivers and servants and cooks. Now you apparently do, though.
Oh yeah.
But I was kind of feeling like they were a bit tone deaf to the plight that most people are in. Not to say that you can't live in a castle and be unhappy and be depressed and potentially suicidal. And my heart definitely goes out to anyone who feels that way. But I think to me, they just seemed a bit tone deaf with what regular people are going through and life in general.
I have to agree with that. I found that they were completely tone deaf to what people were going through. And there's a lot of crying, woe is me. The Queen has cut us off financially.
We're still like 40 years old almost. But
I could even put his age aside here. The reality is, when Diana died, he inherited a lot of money from his mother.
Yes.
Meghan herself was a successful working actress, and she has a bunch of millions stashed away. They moved to LA. They buy, I think it's a $15 million.
Yeah, 14.9 or something $1 million house with a chicken coop.
Property. It's hard to feel bad.
Yeah, that's what I felt. And there was a few things that they said that I found to be factually inaccurate, like some things to do with the title, His Royal Highness, like there were actual historical and factual reasons for why that was not being given, and then the fact that they'd moved to North America and were no longer senior royals, which was why security was being removed, and they weren't really being forthright about those things. So then some of the other things they were saying, I felt, how can I necessarily accept fully what they're saying, because I know that on some things they weren't completely being open and honest, and so that bothered me.
I read that too. I read that William's children also didn't have a title, that they have to be next in line to have the title.
Yeah, I read something about, I thought his children might have it because they are, after William, I think his oldest son is next in line, but there is something to do with you have to be in that direct line to the throne. Prince Andrew's grandchildren don't have the title.
Right.
Princess Anne's grandchildren do not. So it's really kind of being consistent with them, and they didn't mention that, and I felt Oprah should have done some research on that and maybe called them out on it. But I'm criticizing Harry and Meghan. I don't want to also be criticizing Oprah. Also, I'm going to be in really big trouble with viewers. So
yeah, everybody loves Oprah.
Yes,
pretty much everybody. Loves
No, I like Oprah, and I thought it was a good interview. And I mean, it touches upon something that I know we were talking about the other day, which is when your family meddles in your marriage or influences your marriage, what should people do in that situation? Because it is a common problem.
It's really hard. So what happens when people are getting divorced, often extended families, especially if they were feeding the couple that's getting divorced some money or benefits, they have a lot to say, and they put a lot of pressure. So it's really difficult sometimes because, if the family is very enmeshed, which I see a lot, I'm sure you see that too. When the family is very enmeshed and they're pulling the purse strings, they're telling you what to do, how to behave. They might be angry at the spouse who left and, a vendetta, like, you left, so you're going to have to pay for this.
No, and I find it can be very meddlesome in the legal process. I have clients where, their mother or their sister or their brother, has 2 cents, is kind of armchair quarterbacking, the case for me, even though they're not a lawyer. And I have to manage that. And that can be a challenge. And the other thing that sometimes happens, and I've been guilty of this myself, I don't know if you have, is, when I've been in a relationship at times and I haven't been treated very well, I'll go and tell my brother or tell my girlfriend, how I'm being treated. And so they start not liking the guy based on the stuff that I've told them. But then I reconcile and I think he's great again, but they can't just drop what I've told them. So they feel differently because of information I gave them, but I don't feel that way anymore. And that can be hard too.
And that's it. And that happens in relationships. And, I know from my own experience, whether it's my mother, my father, not liking that guy anymore. And it's really hard to take that back. So I think that people, if they are getting divorced or separating, they should be very careful of what they share with their friends, with their family. Your friends and family, they mean well. They really do. They love you and they're there to protect you. But the reality is they don't know the nitty-gritty particulars of your case, of your situation. Their advice, although it might be well-meaning, isn't necessarily good advice because they're saying, I know so-and-so's aunt's, cousin's, brother's, wife, whatever, and they got X amount in the settlement and they were married around the same time that you were, so your cases should be the same, so you're entitled to that, so just fight them and don't give up.
Yeah.
But really, everybody has different circumstances.
For sure, everyone has different circumstances, and people often don't, understand that. And I agree with what you just said. I think you have to be mindful of what you share with people. But then, then someone might say, well, then who can I share with then? If I can't share with my friends and family, if I'm going through something difficult and I can't afford a therapist, then who do I share with? And, I guess that's the challenge, right? You have to share somewhat, but you just have to be mindful that once it's out there, you can't take it back.
Exactly. lots of things you can't take back.
No, so for sure.
Like emails that you send to your ex-spouse, you can't take those back, and they could be
end
used
up in
against
court.
you.
That's right. They could be
Right?
evidence in court. So yeah, no, that's that, and that happens all the time, all the time. So.
Yeah,
So I guess final word on Harry and Meghan and the royals. I don't know. Are you team Harry and Meghan, or are you team royal family?
I'm not fond of the royal family for so many reasons. You know, I just think that it really hasn't moved with the time and how they treated Diana and all of that. Really, I don't care one way or the other.
In the middle.
I don't really care what, you know, they're not my friends, my family, and people that I'm involved with, but I wish them well and, you know, hope that they're happier in their new life and where they are.
Yeah.
And that it takes away some of the stress for them, because I don't want to see anybody unhappy.
No, and I think people do need to understand when they're getting married that, like, you are marrying into, like, whether it's the royal family or my family or your family, like, you are marrying into a family a little bit. And
a lot.
Yeah, a lot. And if you don't like them going in, it is going to be a problem. Like, you know, you need to be mindful of that when you go in to a situation like that, because it's not going to get better after you're married. So,
as a mediator, and I don't know if this happens as a family law lawyer, sometimes people want in their parenting plan who can and can't be around the children.
Yes.
Do you see that?
Oh, I see it all the time. I'll have a client and I don't want my mother-in-law around my child, you know, and I say, well, I can't do that. And that's not going to happen unless, you know, if she's abusive or, you know, if there's actually
a good reason.
Yeah. Not just that you don't like her or that she doesn't like you. You know, and unfortunately, even if she badmouths you around the child, I mean, we try to deal with that, but it's very hard to, you know, have some sort of a court order that would prohibit a child from being around a grandparent. There'd have to be a lot of stuff that's been done.
Grandparents have rights?
They do. Yeah. They do, for sure. So now, I came across an interesting case last week, and I chatted about it actually on my Instagram Live the other day with Steve Benmore, who's a fellow lawyer, and I'd love to get, you know, your opinion on it a little bit as well. It was a COVID case, and I find it interesting that we're now going into year 2 of COVID, and I'm still getting new COVID cases, and there's still new law developing. And this case was interesting because it involved mental health issues with children. And so up until now, most of the COVID cases to do with children had to deal with, like, physical safety. You know, is it safe for them to go to the classroom? Is it safe for them to do this or that? Or should they be online? And are protocols being followed? We didn't really look at their mental safety or their mental health. And so this particular case involved a family from Hamilton. And the mother wanted to take the 3 children, who were ages 18, 16, and 13 to Newfoundland for the holidays. And Dad agreed, and so off she went to Newfoundland over the Christmas break. But it was agreed that she was supposed to come back after the Christmas break was over.
So it was supposed to be a 2-week holiday?
Yeah, 2-week holiday. Okay. But she didn't come back. And so what happened was that she said, you know, kids are happy here. Like, it's beautiful in Newfoundland. COVID's hardly a problem. Like, everything's open. They can do stuff. They don't have to be doing online learning. They can actually go to a school here. They can, you know, go to a store, and life is pretty normal other than just maybe wearing a mask. And so, you know, they asked the 18-year-old, you know, do you want to stay in Newfoundland? Yeah, the 18-year-old said, I want to stay in Newfoundland. 16-year-old, yeah, no, I'd like to stay here now too. The 13-year-old said that he was absolutely terrified at the thought of returning to Ontario because he was so afraid of getting COVID. And so the judge decided that rather than ordering them back, which would have been what I would have expected to happen, because normally in these types of cases, that's what happens, the judge decided that they could stay in Newfoundland, not indefinitely, that the children were to do virtual counseling on Zoom with a counselor in Hamilton. And, you know, as things opened up here, they will have to come back. But the judge said that the mental health considerations for this poor 13-year-old who was so upset at the thought of returning to Ontario with the way COVID is here, that it would be too traumatic, and it was not in his best interest to move them. And that was the decision. So I'm curious, like, what do you, like, if people came to you as a mediator, yes. In a situation like that, like, what do you think of that decision?
Well, firstly, as a mediator, I won't give advice. I can't tell people what to do. Because I have a social work background, I can speak to the mental health piece and what's normal for kids and what's not normal for kids. The one thing about COVID is really everybody's flying by the seat of their pants because we have never lived through a pandemic. Like, we didn't live through the Spanish flu, right?
No.
So we're all sort of guessing, right? And as time goes on, and as we're going into, I'm going to cry year 2 of this, and we are seeing the mental health issues with the kids. But I'd have a lot of questions of the family as the mediator, just to learn a little bit more of what's going on. So, number one, did the children approach you? Did they share this with you? Because you, Leanne, said they asked the children, and I always teach parents, you don't want to drag your kids into conflict. So you don't want to ask your kids, if they volunteer information to you, that's one thing. But you don't say, so what do you want to do? Because often when you do that with kids, children will tell what we call the more favored parent what they want to hear.
Right.
Sometimes they'll tell the more vulnerable parent, meaning, the one that's going to cry and I'm going to miss you and so sad.
Yeah.
And
or sometimes they'll tell each parent what they want to hear when they're in their presence, but not, together, right?
Right. They do that too because children are very good at playing their parents. Mm-hmm. So I'd want to know a little bit about that. Also, 18, 16, these are older kids. Don't older kids have a say in where they're going to go? So to me, to hear a judge ordered an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old,
I think it was more focused on the 13-year-old.
Was it more?
Yeah, it was more focused on the 13-year-old.
Okay.
Yeah,
so,
I know you haven't read the case. So.
I have not read the case, and I knew you were filming on the Instagram, but I had a client, so I couldn't watch.
No, maybe I should have sent it to you beforehand, but I like to keep Jennifer on her toes, so here we are.
So, okay, so with the 13-year-old, well, there is definitely the mental health. My personal opinion of these lockdowns are not good for children because they are learning, they're at an age at 13 where they're learning their peers have such influence. They're learning that break away from your parents as being everything. Sorry, parents, you don't like to hear that because, your little kids are going to say, oh, I never want to leave you, mommy. I never want to leave you, daddy. But at 13, their friends are a heavy influence. So they're not getting normal socialization. They're not developing the socialization skills that they need. Yeah. And it's boring. And especially where we live, I'm going to say that it's worse because it's so cold. When it's December and snowy and freezing, people don't want to even meet 6 feet apart, at a distance to chit chat with their friends. Perhaps if we lived in a warm climate, the socialization problem wouldn't be as bad.
Right.
Because people could do things outdoors, much like in the summer here.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. I mean, I know, for example, I have a 17-year-old daughter, and over the last couple months, like whenever she saw her friends, they had to get together outdoors. And there were some days when it was really cold. Like, I was shocked that they were still like bearing the cold just to see each other. And so I do think that, that is a factor. And I mean, and I do agree, I think this whole thing, it's really wearing on all of us. At this point, I think last year when it first started, none of us thought we'd be sitting here a year later.
But they said 2 weeks.
Yeah, we were supposed to flatten
We're
the
flattening
curve.
that curve. 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, oh God, I have to be home for 2 weeks.
Yeah, no, I couldn't imagine. And so, and I kind of respect that the court took into account like mental health for these children rather than just physical safety and physical, health, because it is such a big factor. And I think a lot of kids out there are, we're all suffering, but kids in particular, like I look at my teens and, not being able to see your friends and, being online all the time. It's not fun.
And they're missing so much that was normal. The kids that are missing their graduations, they're missing their sports practices, they're missing their dance classes, all those things that make up their childhood. Yeah. There's just nothing normal.
No, there isn't. And it's, and I don't know, like we seem to live here in Toronto, we're like in the most restricted zone. I heard that apparently it is, in the world it possibly, I don't quote me on that because I don't know 100% that that's accurate, but I find too, it's hard, like I have friends who live in some other regions of Ontario or my brother's out in New Brunswick and stuff, and like they're fed up, and I'm thinking, well, and even you, because you're at least a little, like you're just north of the city, so you're in a different zone right now. Like I'm still in this Toronto gray that, we still can't even eat in a restaurant, outdoors or indoors. So it's tiring. And so I could see, but if I was in the father's position in this case, I would be very upset with that decision, that my kids get to, what was supposed to be a Christmas break, and, now it may be months before I see them.
I get that, but I really think what the judge was doing, and again, I'm just guessing, but I think the judge really tried to step back and say, okay, I get mom's point, I get dad's point, but what's best for this kid?
Yeah, no, and that's what it's supposed to be, right? Like that is the best interest of the child is what is supposed to be the dominant, factor, the only factor in a case like that. So it's good that the judge took that into account, for sure.
Do you think the dad's going to appeal?
Good question. I feel like Hamilton now is in a different zone anyway. Like they can probably do all these things, so maybe they, should be coming home soon. It may all be moot at this point, anyway. I think the case was heard in January, but it was just released recently. So, as things evolve, I think it wasn't a decision that they could permanently stay there. So, who knows, maybe they've already been told they had to come back.
Yep. I can see the dad not being happy, but maybe a therapist could speak to him and try to get him unstuck.
Yeah, no,
from his position.
Yeah, and maybe when he sees his children thriving, that in the environment they're in right now, that would help him as well. So.
Interesting case, though.
Yeah, no, interesting case. And, thank you to our audience who's, tuned in for, I guess this is our second episode of the Dish on Divorce, number 2.
Thank you all for joining us. I'm Jennifer Barkin.
And I'm Leanne Townsend.
We're really glad that you joined us today, but we want to know what you want to hear about. We want to know what you find interesting, what you find helpful. So please, you can contact us by Instagram, Facebook, through our websites, and let us know, because this show's for you, and we want to give you things that are relevant, things that you'll find helpful.
So thanks for tuning in to the Dish on Divorce. Bye for now.
Bye.